When we all first saw Kyoshi, we looked at her fans and immediately knew that they were cool as hell. But your second thought probably was, wait, her main element is Earth. She was born an Earthbender, so why would she need fans? Well, we finally know the answer to this question deep in the Avatar canon, and I can't wait to share this story with you, so hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and let's get into it. So when most people picture Kyoshi, they picture the Earth Kingdom at its most intimidating. The face paint, the towering stance, the cold stare, the island she literally tore away from the mainland using earthbending. Everything about her feels heavy, grounded, and immovable. It all really says Earth Kingdom and Earthbender, which is exactly why the fans become so interesting when you stop treating them just like a decoration. What do they actually mean? Well, because Kyoshi is an Earth avatar, she is remembered as raw earthbending power in human form. She's the avatar that people bring up when they want to talk about justice with consequence. So why is one of her most iconic weapons so light, so elegant, and almost dance-like? Why is her signature item a pair of metal fans? Well, the answer starts long before Kyoshi became the avatar anyone feared. It starts with her mother, Jessa. Kyoshi's mother was an airbender, so Kyoshi is half airbender and half earthbender. Jessa was an air nomad from the Eastern Air Temple, and she became an airbending master while she was still young, which already tells you just how gifted she must have been. In the world of Avatar, an airbending master should mean peace, discipline, detachment, and spirituality. Air nomads are usually the moral opposite of greed and violence. They're the people that Aang spends his entire life trying to remember, trying to honor, and of course trying to emulate. But Jessa's story twists that image completely. She left that life behind and she fell in love with Hark, an Earth Kingdom thief and performer, and together they became part of the criminal underworld. These two founded the Flying Opera Company, who were moving through the Earth Kingdom like a traveling circus. They mixed performances, bending, theft, and violence into one strange family of outlaws. So Kyoshi was born into contradiction from the very beginning. Her father connected her to the Earth Kingdom, theater, disguise, and the painted face that she would later make legendary. And her mother, on the other hand, connected her to the air nomads, but through a broken version of that legacy. And the clearest symbol of that broken legacy was the fans. The reason Kyoshi used fans was because of her mother, but sadly the way she actually got them is much sadder and much more complicated. So the original reason that Jessa, Kyoshi's mother, originally created those metal fans was because her own airbending started to decline. The decline is brutal because airbending in Avatar is deeply spiritual. It's connected to the breath, to freedom, detachment, and basically the way of life for anyone who would be an airbender. But in fact, that wasn't the outcome, that was the cause. Jessa believed that abandoning the air nomad's spiritual life had damaged her bending, so the fans became a way to recover what her body and spirit could no longer do naturally. She believed that becoming a criminal and basically shunning all of her culture, all of her tradition, and all of her family in the air nomads was damaging her spiritual connection to the bending, because she believed that airbending came from that spiritual connection. And then, on one fateful day, Kyoshi's parents abandoned her in the city of Yokoya in the Earth Kingdom. This was a horrific and traumatic moment for Kyoshi, but they left some things behind. A chest, a few other nicks and knacks, but inside that chest was something that you can probably guess. It was the famous fans of Jessa. On top of the fans, there were also the face paints and the ornaments that you later see her wear in her basically infamous Avatar uniform. Despite the extreme trauma of being abandoned and the hatred she had for her mother and doing what she did to her, Kyoshi later took up the use of her mother's fans, and upon using them, she discovered that it improved her earthbending and allowed her to move the objects more precisely. She could move rocks with precision that had never been seen before by raw earthbenders. On top of this, she also discovered that her fans could improve her waterbending. She accidentally waterbent for the first time ever when she automatically defended herself with the fans from a water attack. Again, showing that these fans transcend the elemental nations. Kyoshi was from the Earth Kingdom, but she could use tactics like Iroh mentioned from all of the other nations, including waterbending and including the opposite element of hers, airbending. Even when that airbending was connected to something that she really was traumatized by, obviously the abandonment by her mother. A man named Wong, who was an earthbender and a member of her mother and father's circus company, eventually trained Kyoshi to properly employ the fans as an extension of her own arm, rather than just a weapon or a way to move things. Another interesting fact is that they also increased the volume of air that could be bent when Kyoshi used airbending. If she was just using her arms, she could easily bend a moderate amount of air, but with the fans she could bend substantial amounts, enough obviously to move the peninsula of Kyoshi Island, turning it into an island. And that means Kyoshi's fans were born from loss. They began as tools made by an air nomad who had cut herself off from her own culture that gave her power. Every time those fans opened, they carried the sound of someone trying to replace something that she had broken in herself. Years later, when Kyoshi takes them up, she is holding the remains of her mother's failure, survival, and shame. That fits Kyoshi perfectly. Kyoshi grows up with a broken inheritance. Her parents abandoned her in Yokoya when she was still a young kid. All they left behind were objects. She doesn't grow up with comforting stories about them. She grows up hungry, unwanted, and alone. The people around her do not treat her like a future avatar. They treat her like a burden left behind by strangers. So when Kyoshi eventually opens a chest that was left behind by her parents, she finds the fans and they arrive like evidence. Proof that her mother existed. Proof that she had power. And proof that she left anyway. That's what makes the fans so strange for Kyoshi. Kyoshi carries them while also hating what her parents did to her. She hates criminals. She hates abandonment. She hates the kind of world that lets children disappear into poverty while powerful people keep moving. Yet the objects she chooses to build her image around come directly from those same parents. And honestly, once you hear what happened to the fans after her death, I don't think Kyoshi would have loved what happened to them. Basically, after her death, the original war fans were placed at the Kyoshi Shrine on Kyoshi Island. However, replicas of her fans, often adorned with rare metals and jewels like sapphires, rubies, and diamonds, were crafted and became prized objects among the Earth Kingdom's elites. A man named Wu, who was a famous singer in the Earth Kingdom, also showed them off and was one of the most well-known buyers of Kyoshi's replica fans. I don't think she would have loved them being used around elite circles and basically passed around as relics and artifacts, basically just to make money for the elites of Ba Sing Se. But regardless, you have to feel for her with how traumatic these fans were to her and how they shaped her life. So as you can see, the face paint part of her personality comes from her father's world of circus performance, her fans come from her mother's damaged airbending, and the avatar becomes a symbol of uncompromising justice because of what her parents did to her. She didn't want that to happen to anybody else in the world. As Kyoshi uses the fans, they help her to focus. They give shape to the force that was too broad and too overwhelming. They let her move tiny objects with more control. And the fans do for Kyoshi's earthbending what they did once for Jess's airbending. They refine the power that is coming from the bender. They turn raw ability into intention. Kind of like how Aang's staff can direct airbending, Kyoshi's fans can direct two streams of earth at once. And this is why Kyoshi is so interesting to me and so many people. She's much more interesting than the simplified version that people sometimes talk about. The meme version of Kyoshi is basically that the avatar who kills people and is very old. In their minds, she becomes like a blunt force avatar. The one people imagine when diplomacy has failed and somebody needs to be buried under a mountain. But her unique fans reveal a more complicated truth. Kyoshi's power was never only heaviness. It wasn't just to use force whenever she could. It was a balance between that heaviness and between lightness. Earth gave her the force and air gave her shape. It's kind of a blending of the cultures like Iroh talks about. Iroh was able to learn a mixture of fire and water, of course culturally, not physically, but when he uses redirection of lightning, he learned that from the water tribe. So Kyoshi is learning techniques to move earth from the air nomads, which is funny how both of those examples are actually using examples and techniques from their opposite element. Obviously fire is the opposite to water and earth is the opposite to air. There is a lot you can learn from your enemy, if you want to view it that way. Or you could, more like Iroh, view it as your counterpart. There are things you can take from the opposite element. And this is why Kyoshi belongs to the Earth Kingdom, but her bloodline crosses nations. Her fighting style crosses elements, and the more you think about it, the more the fans actually perfectly fit her despite their quite unfortunate origins. Earthbending is about standing your ground. Airbending is about movement, evasion, and redirection. Kyoshi's whole life sits between those ideas. She's abandoned at first, so she learns to endure. She is lied to, so she learns to see through people. And she is given overwhelming power, so she learns to focus it through the tools that came from a completely different bending philosophy. And I just want to talk about what these fans actually mean for the Four Nations. So what this kind of implies is that many airbenders, as they got into an old age, began to use different tools and different artifacts and probably relics by the time later on to enhance their airbending and make sure that they could still have a connection to their art. And this is because for airbenders, their bending was actually part of their spirituality. In a way, it was kind of their religion. As we know, in the Air Nomads, almost every single member of the Air Nomads was born as an airbender because of how spiritual they were. And that connection comes because they were all airbenders. So this is why we see things like staves, fans, and of course other things that are used to augment and enhance their airbending as they get older.